Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of Top Bins with Twins. We are going through our 2026 World Cup prep at the moment. And so this podcast is going to focus on players. And so, Luke, just to share a little context with people, the reason why we wanted to focus on players is because this tournament really does boil down to moments where it looks from, Maradona's hand of God to James Rodriguez pulling in the ball, James pulling down the ball off his chest, hitting a volley from distance. Just those brilliant moments. Van Persie with the diving header, the Flying Dutchman. These little things that, really get into legacy and all these like big topics. So we just wanted to take a second to really dive down into like the players that are going to make this World Cup. So, Luke, are you excited for this one?
Very excited. And what you can all do while you're here watching, hit the subscribe button right down there. Leave us a
Mhm.
like if you like the content because we are so excited to talk to you all about the most influential players of the 2026 World Cup. As Paul was saying, players are the most important thing about football, right? They're the ones who are making the split-second decisions, and creating those moments of pure joy and adulation that we feel whenever a player volleys a strike in from outside the box when, they're not expected to win that group stage match, right? So the players are hopefully the most important part of this World Cup. Hopefully, it is not defined by the officiating, as we see in a
You
lot of
never know.
domestic leagues this year. So, without any further ado, though, we're going to get into the most impactful players that we see and expect for 2026 in the World Cup. To set the stage, though, Paul, do you feel like that? What do you think is most important for someone who doesn't follow football? What's the best thing for them to know before we dive into these individual players?
I would say that oh that's such a big topic. I would say the best thing to know is that there's specific players that, if you're a fan of, basketball, American football, there's specific players that set themselves apart that I'm sure that everybody watching this podcast has heard of, Messi, Pinaldo, or anybody in that realm, these really
Context.
big names.
Context. Why do you refer to Ronaldo as Pinaldo? Just in case the listeners don't know.
So some people inflate their numbers with penalties and act like they're the best goal scorer of all time, which they could be. But there's levels to this game, and I'm not choosing a side. I'm just throwing that statement out there for all the people out there that aren't deep in the weeds soccer fans like us. But I will say that in this podcast, where hopefully we'll introduce you to some players that you don't know going into this World Cup, and you'll be able to keep an eye out for some specific players that really could make a dramatic impact on this World Cup and cement
Uh-huh.
either their legacy to be somebody that is now an icon and forever known in their home countries, or somebody that consistently is underwhelming, like somebody like Neymar, who is not on this list because his career, which no fault to his
Who
own, likely.
who also has been included in Brazil's squad for the upcoming World Cup, which was just announced not minutes ago as of us
Mhm.
recording this. And they're, for the, in-depth soccer fans and the players who know a lot of players by name, and you would recognize the name of João Pedro, right? He's a player at Chelsea FC, so he plays in the Premier League. He's of Brazilian descent, so he would represent Brazil, right? Because that's the international country that he was born in, or he has relatives that were born in, right? So he represents them. He has been left out of the World Cup squad. There may potentially be an injury reason there why he was not included, but he's had 15 goals and 10 assists in the Premier League this season, which is a very good return. And we'll see a list of players' goals and assists as we go into the top 10 that we put together. So keep that in context. Someone who has 25 goal contributions in the Premier League, widely seen as nothing else the most competitive league in Europe, that he was not included for Brazil, which is very noteworthy. My
Mhm.
gut tells me it's injury related because there's no way he's not included in the squad. So, yeah, but something to note there before we get into this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I
Let's just let's just dive into it. Any other thoughts though before we do?
Um, I think, a good way for you for let's say you're someone who's interested in the World Cup, and maybe you just don't feel like you have enough context. One of a great recommendation for the listeners here. Once we go through the list of our top 10 players, just go and find some highlights of the players if you haven't seen them play, because that's going to give you not only an understanding of how they play, but maybe what they look like, right? And so then when you're watching the matches, you recognize them and you're like, oh, that's Harry Kane. I remember him from Top Bins with Twins. And
There
then
we
you can give
go.
us a shout out at that point. But just, whenever you can see these players in action, you get a better feel for their play style, and kind of how they carry themselves on the pitch. Then you can get into in-depth interview. Like there's so many different rabbit holes you can dive down for this one. But that would be my recommendation to you all out there. If you don't wanna go that route, maybe just go back and watch some highlights from World Cup 2022 in Saudi Arabia, in
Yeah.
Qatar, because that there were some really incredible moments that I'm sure both of us will bring up as we go through this list of players here.
Yeah, and Luke, I think another good reference point too is even Euros 2024, AFCON this
Mhm.
past year, any of those big Confederation Cups too that are kinda more stagnated along with the World Cup, so you don't have to go all the way
Yep.
back. But both
Mhm.
are a great reference point. So, anywhere
Completely
in
agree.
there is a great point if you know you really wanna dive in and do more research before the World Cup because it's gonna get here really quickly. I think we're 25 days out right now from the World Cup. We're
Yep.
somewhere kind of in that time frame, so before we know it, the World Cup's gonna be wrapping up, and we're gonna be like, "Oh, what happened? Where'd it go?"
I know tournaments like this always fly by so quickly. And I'm of the personal belief I love the high level of football once we get into the knockout stages, right? And if you haven't listened yet, go listen to our previous podcast, where
Mhm.
we talk about an intro to the World Cup, and that'll better explain what the qualification process is, what the format is for the World Cup, and then kind of what it looks like once you get through the group stage and you go into the knockouts. So we better define that in a previous episode. But I really think at the group stage where you have, teams playing 3 matches and the top teams in their group advance, that's the most exciting time for me because A, there's the most football, right? There's so many games to consume, and this year there's probably gonna be too many to consume, right? Because there's just so many. But it's kind of like, for an American listener, kind of like March Madness on the, very beginning, what is it, round of 72, 84? I can't remember exactly
It
what it's at
was
now.
64, I think, and then now it's
64.
gone up.
Now they've upped it. Yep. Yep. So, it's like that opening weekend of March Madness, and there's it's just so much fun. A lot of excitement in the air for that. So,
Mhm. And this one's every
yeah.
4 years, so buckle up because it's gonna like I said, it's gonna fly by. Let's go ahead and dive into the slides here, though, Luke.
Yeah,
Let's
that sounds good. And we can kind of start out again with the groups as we were just talking about, because I feel like that gives gives the people a good idea of what to look out for there, right? So, but with that in mind, the important thing here as we kind of think about the players, right? We know that soccer is a game that is defined by the moments. The moments are an accumulation of what happens throughout the course of a match. But a player that can have an incredible moment of brilliance, that can define your success or failure at the World Cup. Um, you know, think about the most high profile match of the last World Cup in 2022. You have France versus Argentina, and Argentina dominated that match for the majority of, the course of the first 90 minutes. But here's the thing, they get up 2-0, and then France has a player who has incredible moments in Kylian Mbappé, and he really didn't touch the ball that much in the match, but ends up,
no.
scoring in the 87th, 89th minute or so to equalize off of an incredibly beautiful 1-2. And he just volleys, half volleys the ball in from outside the box with, a strike that truthfully only 3 or 4 people in the world could manage, especially with the pressure and the technical quality required for that. So, We are talking about these players because the moments that they create are really what drives fan passion for the sport, right? It's that brilliance that attracts us and keeps us coming back. So let's take a look at the groups, Paul, real quick.
Yep.
And we can kind of point people's eyes to certain groups here based upon the players we're going to talk about. So the first one that's really important, I think, that we should mention is Group C. We have Brazil there. That's a team that is filled with very talented players. The question is how the team plays together, right? But I
Mhm.
do think there will be some pretty incredible moments um, that'll keep us all captivated as we're watching. Is there another group that kind of pops off the page that you think ties into what we're talking about here, Paul?
For what we're going to be discussing today, I would say that you're probably looking at Group I. That's the biggest standout there. And the
Hmm.
reason why we're going to go for that is because, I mean, with France, all of their attackers are stores, right? I mean, we were just talking about Mbappe, and who knows, France could play a team where they don't start Mbappe if he's being a
Yeah.
menace. They could. And there's not many
Hmm.
teams in the world where you could say that they would have a suitable replacement for Mbappe, which is kind of blasphemous to say anyways, because he's just insanely good. You saw what he did in the last World Cup, as Luke was saying, but then you also have
Hmm.
this Norway team that has Erling Haaland, and it's his first World Cup. Norway honestly looked pretty good through qualification. They looked like a pretty strong team. It's going to be different going into the World Cup, but Senegal also could
Hmm.
pose both big problems to both of those teams. That's a very good Senegal team that we see there. So that group's going to be interesting. I would also say too, maybe if we're just looking star power, possibly let's see. I would say Group I, really. Group I
Yeah,
or,
Group I is very
maybe
interesting.
Group F. I mean, you have some good players
Yeah.
there for Sweden who somehow qualified without winning a single World Cup qualifying game, but they
Yeah,
still have stars.
it's pretty crazy. We covered that more in the last episode on how that was possible. So like I said earlier, refer back to that if you're interested in learning more. But I agree. I think Group I is really interesting because of France and Norway. There could be some very high scoring matches whenever we look at that group. Um, I
Mhm.
could see some of those end up being 3-4, maybe 4-2. Like there will be lots of goals scored in this group, is what my gut tells me. Um, and then, kind of what will segue us into the next portion that we're about to talk about, Group L. I think there will be lots of goals there too.
Yeah.
Only because the best scorer currently in the world is playing in that group and Harry Kane for England, but also because Croatia is a very good team as well. And I think there's a pretty big gulf in talent between England and Croatia, and then Ghana and Panama as well. So we'll just kind of see how that group plays out. But I do see a lot of goals being scored in that group as well.
Yeah, Luke, and just this is kind of off topic, but for the listeners out there, don't be surprised if Panama give England a pretty tough game.
They
I
will
think
dig in. They'll
I think that could be a trap game for England, especially with the other 2 teams in that group. Panama are a little tricky with how they set up, and they'll be extremely physical with England's attackers. So
I'm going
just
to use the
throwing that out
most
there.
cliche of all cliches.
Oh, come on.
The
Come on,
If
Libra.
England get an early goal, then I think the match is completely different, right? But if Panama can get to the 60th, 70th minute without conceding a goal, it's going to
Mhm.
get really nervy for England because
Yeah.
ideally, if you're looking at the group and you're England, you would almost write down Panama as an automatic 3 points,
You'd
right?
want to.
Ideally, you would. Obviously, there's gonna be a lot of respect for every team you play, but if you're being realistic, you would say that you would think that would be an automatic 3 points. So,
Yeah.
it is football. We know that things can be
It is
very,
football.
very hard to predict, but, that's kind of what I would predict there. So, um, yeah, let's go into the next slide, Paul, where we're gonna look at the top goal scorers in the top 5 leagues currently. Um,
Luke, when you say
so
top 5 leagues, can you explain what that context is?
yes, excellent question. Top 5 leagues, so I'm talking about domestic leagues. So these players are playing for their club teams. These top 5 leagues are the best leagues in Europe based upon the country, right? So we have in England, we have the Premier League. In France, we have League One. In Italy, there is Serie A. And then what? Oh, I'm sorry, Spain, there's La Liga. And then I believe the 5th is gonna be,
Would
it
you say the
looks like
Premier
there's
League?
actually I think Portugal's the other
England,
one. Yeah, the
France,
5th one.
Italy,
Oh, no,
France.
I missed Germany, Bundesliga. Yeah. This is also I think this is including some of the other smaller leagues as well, though, because I see a Dynamo Zagreb player in there, and then a couple others.
There's a
And then
German league team too.
yeah, so this is just going to be across Europe, right? From where we're pulling this list. But the thing to remember here, right? Really importantly, we can look at the coefficient tab on the right there. That's telling us how difficult of a league these players are playing in. And whenever we look, right, the top 3 being Harry Kane, Erling Haaland, and Kylian Mbappé, all of their coefficients are 2. And then 4th, where we have Dion Bello, I think, sorry for mispronouncing that if I did. The coefficient for the league is 1.5. So that just means the league is not seen as being as difficult as what it could be, right? In comparison. So if we look at the top of the list, Harry Kane is number 1, right? He has played 31 matches in the Bundesliga and scored 36 goals, which is absolutely incredible. I mean,
Yep.
he's scoring above a goal a game, which it might not sound like that much if you're not acquainted with football and the nature of the sport as closely as we are. But a goal per match is an incredible return.
Yeah.
So that tells us that Harry Kane is not only playing for a very good team, and the coefficient tells us he's playing in a very good league. That also tells us that he is incredibly clinical. And usually, clinical is the terminology you want to use whenever you're talking about whether or not someone finishes their chances or not. So, um, anything else on this list that pops out to you, Paul, as we're looking at this?
I think you're kind of right. The top 3 forwards. I would highlight Igor Thiago, who plays for Brentford at the moment. He's going to be. Was he on the list for Brazil? Like, do you remember seeing his name on there?
I believe so. Keep going, but I'll look it up while
Yeah,
you're
but
looking in the background.
he could be somebody that provides some goal contributions. I highly doubt that he starts for Brazil, but he's somebody that's had a great season. He's a big physical 9, really likes the ball at his feet and can play well with his
Uh-huh.
wingers. So could be a good way for Brazil to connect some different aspects on their team. You're exactly right with the top 3 up there, though. I mean, those are, you would say, the 3 best goal scorers in the world at the moment. So
Mhm.
I would expect to see all of these guys banging in some goals this summer in the U.S. or Mexico or Canada. But
For sure. Yep.
yeah, nothing else too big off that.
An important note there, Paul, kind of like you were talking about, Igor Thiago was included in the Brazilian squad, so
He
he will
deserving,
be
he
at
should be there.
yep, so he
He's had a
will
great
be at the
season
World
for
Cup.
Brentford.
Yeah, he's been so good this season. Um, so what we can do next though is when we go to this next slide, this is gonna tell us the most valuable players. And so this is a rough approximation of how, by market value, what this means is if a club were to go to another club, and we'll use Lamine Yamal as an example.
Let's say for
If
Arsenal.
if Arsenal wanted Lamine Yamal from Barcelona, they would go to them and pay 200 million pounds, or I think this is in euros. It looks like
I
it's
think
in
it's
euros.
Euros.
They would go and pay 200 million euros in order to get him to come to their club. So that's why market value is really important because it gives teams an idea of how much you'd have to pay in order to get the player on their team. But also what that does is it serves as a good valuation metric for us to say, okay, well, maybe these are the best players in the world, or maybe it's a combination of best player in the world with most potential. So that's why we see Lamine Yamal up here at age 18. He's valued at 200 million euros because he's so young, but he's also so incredibly talented.
Mhm.
And that's that's kind of across the board. Erling Haaland being at 20, sorry, Mbappe being at 27 and valued at 200 million euros is actually really incredible. It just
Dude, it's
shows how
crazy. He's
talented and how great he
27, isn't
is.
it?
Yeah. It feels like he should be younger than that.
Yeah, it does. But does it make you feel
Yeah.
old? It makes me feel old.
It does.
Mbappe's
It does.
27.
Yeah, it definitely catches the eye when you see that there.
It's like, oh
It's
shit.
insane. Yeah. So, Paul, any players here that you'd like to highlight? I know we're going to talk about some of them as we move forward, but
We will, but some of these people aren't on our list. So I mean, I think it's probably a good thing to highlight. I think Pedri there at Barcelona, he's 23 years old, number 4 on the list. That's somebody that is going to be the fulcrum or the engine essentially for that Spanish team in their midfield that kind of makes all the different pieces work. And as Luke was talking about with Lamine Yamal, we'll mention this later on when we discuss him in more detail. But injury concerns for him going into the World Cup. So we'll have to look at Spain has other depth options where they can play people, but that should put more emphasis on maybe Pedri will play a different kind of role that he would have compared to what he was used to with Yamal. So could see some
Mhm.
fluctuations there with the team setup for Spain if Yamal can't play. And then also on the list, I mean Jude Bellingham, such an interesting player. He's an English, what is he, 22-year-old, one
Mhm.
of the more diverse and well-rounded players in world football who has really shown that he has the level to be there and play in these top matches, but it's kind of a little bit in the discussion of will he even start for England at this point? which is
Mhm.
which is really interesting if you look at his value of 140 million. That's above Declan Rice at 11, who's 120. Obviously, players offer different things, but I would say from what I could see with Tuchel is that Rice will probably be nailed into that midfield, and Jude Bellingham may not be.
Yeah, I mean, we'll just have to see. Especially what will give us an idea on that is as we build into the World Cup. A lot of these teams are playing friendlies, right?
Mhm.
So we'll keep an eye on those friendlies. A lot of managers see that as a tune-up, right? And they're not necessarily going to be playing, especially if they have an idea of who they want to start. You're getting those players time on the pitch together and making sure that they have those minutes in the legs, building them into the World Cup because you're really trying to just synergize that chemistry as quickly as possible. So keep a very close eye on how those friendlies go because that'll
Yeah,
give us a good idea of who's starting for a lot of these teams as we build into the World Cup.
it's a great point to bring up there, Luke.
I mean, the other like final note that I had there, it was just kind of surprising. In this picture of Freddie Valverde, I'm surprised he doesn't have a head wrap on. Um, following the altercation. Sorry, I couldn't help it. I
Um,
had to bring it up. If you know, you know. Otherwise, just
So,
let it go.
like, let's just do a brief sidebar here real quick. So, Real Madrid, biggest club probably you could argue in the world. You can argue it, whatever you want to say, has had a disaster of a season compared to the normal standards. Where apparently there's multiple camps now that of players that hate each other and different factions, led by we're not going to name anybody. All these things, and then now they're bringing in Jose Mourinho, who is the king of chaos. I wouldn't even like. How would what comp would you give Jose Mourinho? Like, if you had to describe him as a fictional character
Um,
or anything.
what a great question. He has a very chaotic energy. I would say, oh, what's the best comparison? I would actually, he's kind of,
Luke,
if you have a thought, go
I'm
ahead.
gonna
I'm
throw some
still
things
thinking
there.
through it.
I think he is Heath Ledger as the Joker, part one before everything unravels. He has all his plans, everything together, a total chaos agent, and then eventually it's probably gonna fall apart in the end. But they may be
Yeah.
successful for a while. Maybe a good comparison. Can you think of anything else?
Um, here's the thing. I picture him as like he's kind of like an old dog. No, no, you know what he is? He's a cat. He is definitely a cat that sometimes makes you think that they're trustworthy and that but he always has a plan. Just the plans never go and work out the way he intended and
Yeah.
just leaves chaos in his wake. So I would say Mourinho's kind of cat-like in that way that it seems like sometimes all he desires is chaos from his decisions. So
Yeah. Good.
yes,
I think that's
Jose
good answer.
Mourinho is a cat. So um
Let's go to the
but
next slide.
onwards we go because we've got a lot to talk about here. Um so this is the list that I put together. Um We'll give the listeners a second to look at it, right? I'll read through it really fast, and then we're gonna go over to Paul's really quickly after we do this, just so you all can see that not only are our lists very similar, but there's a lot of names on here that with some slight variances that we'll talk about. So, for the 10 most influential players in the World Cup 2026, I have Harry Kane first, then Kylian Mbappe, who we talked about a little bit earlier ago, Bruno Fernandes, who plays for Portugal, Vinicius Jr. plays for Brazil, Florian Wirtz with Germany, Rodri with Spain, Erling Haaland with Norway, Jeremy Doku with Belgium, Lionel Messi with Argentina, and then Alexander Isak as a wild card and dark horse for
That
Sweden.
is that is an absolute dark horse.
It is, but I'll dive into it later. So let's go over to your list, read yours, and then we'll kind of go, free flow talk through the players we put on here.
Okay. So my list, whenever I put it together, I don't see this as a 1 to 10 list. It's just a collective list, right?
Mm-hmm.
Could whatever. We'll just go with that. But so Messi, Kylian Mbappe, Harry Kane.
Mm-hmm.
As you can see, there's a lot of similarities between me and Luke's list. But Virgil van Dijk, who I think this could be a legacy World Cup for him. If we're talking legacies, we have Wirtz, who is somebody that has struggled at Liverpool, but always really functions well in that Germany structure. Lamine Yamal, as we talked about, best young talent, maybe arguably best player in the world. And then Bruno Fernandes, Vinicius Jr., Holland, goes without saying. And then
Mm-hmm.
Ousmane Dembele, who reigning Ballon d'Or champion, so player of the year in Europe and across that space. Currently going into a Champions League final against Arsenal, just went off with an injury in one of their league matches. So we'll
Mm-hmm.
see if
That they
he's on
lost.
for that.
Yep.
They lost. But yeah,
The Paris FC.
yeah, literally, I think you can literally almost kick a ball between both stadiums, like they're that close, which is something that I would love to see one day
Yeah. Me too. Me
in
too.
person.
Whenever we do our tour of France, we'll do that. Um,
Yeah.
but so yeah, I think, Paul, here's the thing. All of these players, as long as they're healthy and they're playing, have the potential to have a vastly outsized impact on this tournament because of how talented they are. Right. So if you had to pick one player on your list, who would you say is going to be the most influential in this tournament? Put you on the spot
Oh,
here. Make you
that
make a
is
prediction.
that's a great question. I am going to go with Messi,
Okay.
and
Do you
that's
want to,
really
as I'm wearing the Argentina
you're wearing
kit,
the
do you want
Argentina
to
kit.
provide additional content of why you think Messi is the most influential player this tournament?
I think everything runs through Messi, and he's somebody that
Hmm.
is what is he, 38 now?
Yeah.
Maybe
Hmm.
36, somewhere in that area. At the tail end of his career, you would say he's playing well in MLS. Obviously, we weren't able to see the coefficient for what MLS is compared to the rest of the world, but MLS is
Hmm.
not a league anymore where it's completely it's somewhat of a respectable league in my opinion. We're American soccer fans. I'm not going to dive into that whole can of worms, but to me, when it really gets down to it for Messi in this World Cup, he still has enough in his legs, I believe, to make a dramatic impact. And this is a great
Hmm.
Argentina structure that he has around him. He has really good defenders, he has good other midfielders, good attackers surrounding him, and he can basically do what he needs to do, which is he's going to walk off the ball, right? You're going to see him
Right.
literally just walking. He's not going to be pressing. The rest of the Argentina team picks up the slack for him, and they just want him in those moments where he can get on the ball and create, have a free kick, do all these different things. And this is realistically I think Messi's time to cement himself as the best player of all time and to make this
Yep.
discussion of the
Mhm.
GOAT conversation to just completely end it. If he gets 2 World Cups, especially back to back at this point in his career, it's non-negotiable, it's non-debatable. He has
Yeah.
signified himself as the best player of all time in world football, and that's why I
Mhm.
think it's most important to talk about him first.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's great context for the listeners because Messi was honestly the player that defined the previous World Cup, right? He's very, at this point, he's very old, right? His legs might not have as much oomph as they did previously, but we do know he's very capable of having those individual moments, as we keep talking about, that could very easily define this World Cup. And he's surrounded by a team that is very good, right? Like there's a high level of talent in the squad. Um, when you look across the board, Argentina are one of the teams that are the favorites, right? And not only do they have a lot of talent, but they have been through the battle and the fire that is a World Cup tournament
Yep,
and come out on the other end as champions, right?
for sure.
Which goes a very long way, right? Once you have those battle scars and you know what it's like in those really difficult moments when the match is so tense and even just making a simple side to side pass has pressure on it, that pass becomes 10% easier, right? Whenever you've done that before, you understand what that pressure feels like.
Yep.
So I would expect Argentina to make a really deep run, and if they, if they end up winning the World Cup, Messi will be the reason why they do.
Yeah.
So,
I
yeah,
I I couldn't agree with you more, Luke, and I think that point too about, past success decreasing the burden of this current success, for lack of a better term there, is so relevant because, I mean, if you look at the Premier League title race at the moment, Arsenal and Man City, both teams are looking at this differently because City have already done it. Arsenal haven't. There's that added pressure on
hmm,
them to continuously perform, and you can see that in the performances, you know? So the Messi point, I really like that. And then
yeah,
Mbappe,
yeah,
we can just transition over to him. He's somebody that had probably one of the most iconic performances in the last World Cup final. He has 3 shots, 3 goals, right?
yeah,
Just
yep,
having 3 moments like that, especially the goals that he scored were so phenomenal, and it
hmm,
honestly felt like it was more comparable to a basketball game with, Steph Curry and LeBron going back and forth
yeah,
in 2017 than it did really a soccer match, which is and especially on that stage, you just absolutely love to see the sport grow, to see
you
performances
do.
like that to
Hmm.
inspire the younger generations because that's how the game grows, and, Mbappe going into this World Cup probably is going to have I mean, he's 27 now. He's no longer that young and up and coming star. We see Lamine Yamal on the list. And
Hmm.
Mbappe probably is gonna have a lot to prove in this World Cup because there's been a lot of things kind of floating around his time at Real Madrid, how it ended at PSG. This is somebody that really could use, a World Cup under their belt or second World Cup. He already won one. Not to run with that, but to just, steady things for him, you know?
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and apologies if you guys can hear my little doggo barking, but we've got a lightning storm rolling through, and he
Yeah.
does not love thunder, so if he's barking, I'm sorry, but hopefully it's not being picked up too hard, and we can probably
Right.
edit that out a little bit as well, so, but I think you bring up a great point with France, Paul. Um, Mbappe is gonna be so incredibly important for them, but the other important aspect of France's team, because they are probably the most talented squad that we'll see at this World Cup, they have so many attacking options that Mbappe doesn't have to score goals. He can also just create chances for other players, and they'll finish the chances, right? He's not going to have to do this completely by himself, but in those really difficult moments, he's the one they're going to look to create those moments of brilliance or create a chance for another player where they, just have to tap the ball onto the far post.
Mhm.
So I think he's a great person to keep an eye on. The real question with France is Didier Deschamps, their manager, is he going to allow them to play to the best of their ability? Because he's known for being a little not overly
Regressive?
progressive in his mindset, right? He's very defensive in how he sets up. And that doesn't really necessarily cater to having these very talented elite attackers. And it can be detrimental for some of them in the long run. Like you were mentioning, Mbappe has kind of had a tough go of it this year at Real Madrid. And a lot of fans are not very happy with how he's performed. But that another reason why is because he's not necessarily overly willing to perform the defensive actions, right? Is he willing to make a 40-yard sprint to recover and cover, that diagonal that's played over to the left wing, right?
Mhm.
From a defensive perspective. So that's always the big question with Mbappe, right? Is he the most well-rounded player? We know he's one of the best, if not the best attacker in the world. So if you want, and we can just stay here, right? Harry Kane is the player that I would say will define this tournament, right? He has
Mm.
been one of the best, he's been the best goal scorer, as we saw on the list we looked at previously, right? Um, and I think that England is also in a group that I believe is very beneficial for them. I think it's a really solid group for them. They're in Group L, I believe. Um, they have Croatia, Ghana, and Panama. And they start out the tournament against Croatia. So you'll hear this said
Rap game.
a million times in the build up to the tournament. The first match of your group stage almost always defines your success or failure in your group, right? Because if you can get out that first match with 3 points, it just becomes so much easier, right? You have that weight lifted from your shoulders and you can go out and just play football, right? And not have that tension of, oh, well, maybe we have to win the next 2 matches in our group in order to get out. So, what are you going to say, Paul, if you want to interject there for a second?
No, I was just agreeing with you.
Yeah.
If you want me to go, I was just gonna go ahead. No, you go. You keep talking. I have
Okay.
something all after you
Yep.
done.
So Harry Kane, he has been absolutely incredible, not only since he moved, he's been incredible from the first day he went to Bayern Munich and incredible with Spurs too, right? He's just a very well-rounded
Mhm.
player, but it seems like he's gone to another level, or the squad that's surrounding him has gone to another level, right? Where his talent may be surrounded by a bit more talent when we look at him. Because since he's gotten to Germany, if you remember when we looked at this just a little bit ago, he was averaging a goal a game, right? I think it was like 1.16 goals per game
Mhm.
during this season, but he's averaging 1 goal per game across every match he's played for Bayern Munich, right? Where I think he's played around 130, 132 games for Bayern Munich since he got there in 2024, and he scored 136 goals, which
It's
is just
unbelievable.
absolutely mind-blowing. So, he's someone that if he can continue to perform at a high level and the surrounding players around him can figure it out, I think Harry Kane could be the defining player of this tournament, and he'd be my nod to win the Golden Boot in this tournament. What the Golden Boot means very simply is it's the player that scores the most goals over the course of the tournament. So, I think he can very much so define this tournament, but it's a question of what does the rest of the team around him look like for England?
So, Luke, we should tell the listeners though. I think you need to admit something to them.
Let's hear it.
You do like this English team more than you like this current crop of US players, and there's no question about it. You you would probably be wearing an England jersey before a USA jersey if you had the choice. If they were both in front of you, your hand would go to an English Harry Kane kit before it would go to a USA Weston McKennie kit. There's no
Well,
doubt.
here's the thing, right, Paul? As you well know, right, with the nature of what we do with our podcasts, we're focused on, and this is what we do outside of World Cup stuff, is we create content for fantasy Premier League, right? So we're looking at Premier League players constantly, and not only is there's a higher level there, right, from English players. I also think we just spend more time with them, right? So it's a little bit easier to get to know them right?
Yeah,
As you spend more time with them over the
for
course of
sure.
things.
Yeah,
So that's kind of where that comes from. I'm always going to cheer for the US, but I definitely do have proclivity towards English players just because of the amount of time and the enjoyment that that I get from watching them.
yeah.
Um, so another player that I think that we should really focus on as we talk about this, because he's having a really good season, is Bruno Fernandes. Um, w- just to offer some context here for the listeners, Bruno Fernandes is having one of the best Premier League seasons that he's had in a very long time for Manchester United. So he plays in the Premier League. This year, he has 8 goals and 20 assists. Um, and what that 20 assists puts him at is he's currently tied for the record for most assists in the Premier League history ever, right? Since the Premier League began. So he's a very creative player. Um, but excuse me, he can also, he also takes part in defensive actions as well, right? He's good at getting stuck in when he needs to, maybe sometimes a little too stuck in, right? Um, Also has a tendency to get a yellow card
The
in a
petulant,
match. A little petulant.
different
That's a good way to say
word I'm not gonna use on our podcast.
it. Good call, Paul. But it's very important to keep an eye on him because I think as Bruno Fernandes goes in this tournament, that is how Portugal is going to go as well. He's at the hub of everything they do. He creates, he's at the center of a lot of their actions. He's also going to take their set pieces. So if we see Bruno Fernandes, who's creating 6 or 7 or 10 chances over the course of, an individual group stage match, I think that if we get that version of Bruno Fernandes, Portugal are gonna be very difficult to beat in this World Cup.
Yeah, I agree with you. I agree with you, Luke. I mean, he is one of the best creators in Europe. There's no way around it. Everybody, I mean, as we saw 2 minutes ago, everybody has their opinion on Bruno Fernandes, but he's the exact definition of a person that you want in your squad that you hate if he's not in your squad. That's
Mhm,
that's really what it boils down to. But he is extremely creative on the ball, and he will create. It wouldn't surprise me if he led this World Cup in chances created.
oh, yeah, for sure. I'm well on board with that one as well. It's always difficult, right? Because as we talk about players playing for their club in domestic leagues, you never quite know how it's gonna translate because then when they go play for their international squads, A, the team is set up differently. B, they're playing with a different group of players that they don't play with on a frequent basis. So it becomes really difficult to extrapolate from club season to international season. That can be there's a lot of gray area there. So um but it does give us context to go off of that can be interesting. So Paul, you have Lamine Yamal on your list, and I know we mentioned him a little bit. Do you want to go into greater detail why you have him on your list? Why you think he might be one of the most influential players in this tournament?
Yeah, I think the word that pops to mind when you think of Lamine Yamal is gravity. So he is somebody with the ball at his feet. He's going to play that right wing position. He's going to be there in Barcelona for the next 10, 15 years as long as he really wants to be. They'll
Mhm,
keep him around. He'll probably end up going somewhere else, eventually, but if you watch him, he does things where I think the only other person you really hear described in the same vein as Messi, where it's,
mhm,
you know, he goes to take a touch that, a defender thinks is gonna be way too long, right? Where they're like, "There's no way he gets to it. I have that ball under control. We have possession. We're gonna go play." And he gets to that next ball, eliminates that defender, then eliminates the next defender, and then finds that perfect pass to get somebody through or has the ability to finish. He is honestly spectacular. I would recommend going to YouTube and just looking up comp mixes of him just absolutely eviscerating teams in Spain or in Europe as
mhm,
well because he's going to be a large part of the creation in that Spain team, like we were talking about with Pedri earlier. If Yamal isn't able to play in this World Cup, it's going to be a massive loss to Spain because he,
mhm.
like I said, the word that really comes to mind with him is just gravity because he causes so many issues for defending teams.
He does, and, the thing when you watch him, right, not only is he's very clinical when he gets in good situations, so what I mean by clinical is he finishes chances that you would expect him to, right? He has a shot, he converts the shot, right?
Mhm.
But he's also really great at creating opportunities for other players,
Yes.
and that goes a really, really long way because when we look at attacking players, usually they have one really great part of their game. Let's say they're really good at dribbling at players and getting past them. Well, then maybe they're not great at finishing the chances, right? But Yamal is a very well-rounded package where he's really good at taking on players,
Mhm.
really good at finding other players in good positions, and also really good at finishing the chances that he gets. So across the board there, he's someone who, without a doubt, could define this tournament.
Yeah, and his composure, I mean, I know that, for context, he's 18 years old, which for some people may seem like, just 1 second, that it's not, anything absolutely crazy that he's 18 years old. He came onto the scene when he was 16. Like, he is
Mhm.
honestly, at this point, kind of a veteran, which is crazy to say,
Yeah.
but for this World Cup, I mean,
Mhm.
he hasn't played in a World Cup yet, but he is not the kind of 18-year-old that's walking on the stage is not prepared. I mean, he's been in some of the biggest games in the last 2
Yeah.
years in Europe, so he'll be ready for this. As long as he's fit, it's going to be really an experience to see how he settles into this World Cup. It's gonna be a fun watch.
Yeah. It really will be. I think he's someone that, there's a section here that we could have done, right, in the podcast talking about the young players to watch. And I would say out of the young players, so anyone below 20, he will be the most enthralling out of anyone that you watch in this World Cup,
Yeah.
just because he has that quick step that you see and it just pops off the screen. So I fear for any defenders that have to go 1v1 against him because you're dancing at shadows there.
You
It
couldn't
would
pay
be a
me
tough
enough
task.
you couldn't pay me enough money and send video would always be on the internet. I would
Yeah.
no chance,
I f
man.
I fear you stand a better chance than I do at this point, Paul. So,
Wow.
um,
Yeah.
well, you know. For any listeners who don't know, I tore my ACL a while back and I'm still recovering. So,
Yeah.
we'll get there eventually, but just not there yet currently. The next player on this list that I think we can mention that, I think we've kind of touched on the majority of the players that we have here on the list. I think Florian Wirtz is someone that deserves a very important mention, right? Because Wirtz is one of those players that he's very kind of similar to Bruno Fernandes that we were talking about earlier. He's someone who's very good at creating chances for other players. Um, but really where he thrives is he's good at finishing chances, but it's his creating chances for other players.
Mhm.
Um, so kind of like I mentioned to about Bruno Fernandes. Wirtz is someone who is going to raise the level of the team around him. But the question is, can the team then raise the level with him as well, right? If Wirtz is creating 5 or 6 chances in a match, but no one can finish the chances, then he had a good tournament. But if Germany has a poor tournament, then it doesn't really matter at the end
Yeah.
of the day, right? Whenever we're having these bigger kind of conversations. So um, he's someone that also I would highly recommend just going and checking out a YouTube video of his highlight clip, because he's very good with the ball at his feet. He's someone who is so much fun to watch. One of my favorite players to watch, frankly,
Yeah.
because he's got a flair to his game that feels a little streets will remember a little bit to me, but also at the same time, I feel like he really just wants to win, right? Like I feel like
Yeah.
that's what matters the most to him. And that comes through in his interviews and the way that he carries himself on the pitch too. So, um, keep an eye on Florian Wirtz because not only is he really good, but there's also a couple other very young German players who I think will link up very well with him. And we saw one of them, Jamal Musiala. He was on the list that we looked up earlier.
Mhm.
He's had some injury, a long-term injury that he's recovering from, so he's had a rather difficult season, but he should be back and, he has been playing for at least a couple months now. but hopefully he's playing into form once we get into the World Cup. So
Yeah.
just keep an eye on Germany. They could make a very deep run in this tournament.
Yeah, I think like we would be remiss to not mention Dembele either. I
Hmm.
think this is, I mean, he's the reigning Ballon d'Or champion, just an absolute menace with the ball at his feet, probably
Yes.
one of the most
Yeah.
creative players, and has completely done a complete 360 in his career, going from the player that was at Barcelona with Messi, missing the last chance to put away, who was it? Roma, I think,
Yes. Yep.
in the Champions
Hmm.
League, probably like almost that maybe what 10 years ago now,
Yeah, it
and
feels like.
just having like this really odd career for where the heights were, moving to PSG, settling in, and just really reaching his full potential and winning the Ballon d'Or
Hmm.
last season. I mean, this
Yeah.
is a player that is going to be part of that just absolutely venomous France attack that could be. He could easily win the Golden Boot as well too.
Dembele might be the last player that I would want running at me doing 3 or 4 step overs back to back,
Yeah,
because not only is he insanely quick, his left foot is just as good as his right foot. That's one of the defining characteristics of Dembele, is that he really can use either foot,
yeah,
which is
great point.
so incredibly important and also makes him a nightmare to defend because he can go either way. And that really, really makes it difficult as a defender and unbalances people a lot. So
Yeah,
just something to keep in mind there, because I think, he's really gonna be a lot of fun to watch. Like we were saying earlier, just gonna it's kind of depend, right? What does it look like for France? How do they set up? Are they more progressive, or are they gonna be a little more defensive with how they, set up their team shape? So
mhm,
um okay, so I think the last player we want to highlight, Paul, if you could go back up to my list.
absolutely.
Um, mm, the player, there are a couple on here that we haven't mentioned. Jeremy Doku, he is someone who very much so known for his dribbling skills. He plays for Manchester City. That's why Paul doesn't like him. Um, Doku has been plagued by the reputation that he's really good at beating people one on one or even two defenders, but then his end product is very poor, right? But that's been slowly getting better this season. So I thought he was someone to keep an eye on, and he could define this tournament for Belgium. Rodri is a really good Spanish player. He plays more of a defensive position. So he's going to be playing central in the midfield there. Very much so known for his defensive capabilities and then his passing, right? He's very good with long diagonals, and those long range passes. So those two players are important. The one that's really the outlier here is Alexander Isak.
Yeah,
And the reason why I've included Isak is because a lot of people would think Isak doesn't belong on this list. But I think if
I think a lot
Sweden
of people
stand
may be right saying that.
if if they stand a chance, and Paul, you know me, right? I have to have, something that's a little off the wall, right? I can't stay inside the box all the time. So
That's why your
Isak was
FPL team does so well, right?
it's very poor, and we don't talk about FPL. So Isak though, if we look at this year, right? He just made the move to Liverpool. His season has been plagued by injuries. He's just really had a really tough year. He's got 4 goals in the Premier League out of 22 appearances. So obviously things just aren't clicking for him right now, but Liverpool have been in turmoil as well. So there are a lot of things there, and I think having maybe even just a little bit of time off will do wonders for him. He just has looked like he's lost a step a little bit. But
Yeah,
in order for Sweden to stand a chance in this World Cup and get out of their group, Isak has to revert back to the player he was at Newcastle, where he made 109 appearances and had 62 goals. So a little over, you're expecting a goal every 2 games, which, Harry Kane ruins
it's a
that for
great
us,
clip. That's a
but that's a
great
really good rate to have for a striker. Um, so I think he's one of those players that keep an eye on him. If he's healthy and fit, which he's been looking better, he could be a really influential player for Sweden, and he's gonna define if they make it out of their group or not.
Yeah, I think that's a really good shout. I will say, Luke, you having 3 City players on your list is not beating the allegations at all. Maybe you should have just
Fair
worn your
enough.
City kit for this podcast. Rodri, who probably will not start for Spain, would be my guess. I highly doubt. I mean, I don't know.
You
Maybe
don't
he
think
will.
so?
I mean,
I
I
think he
just
definitely
don't
will.
think.
There's no way. That's
Well,
the rest that
no, no,
he's
no.
been getting
Let me
lately is
let
for
me
the
talk.
World Cup.
Let me finish. I think that in the group stage games, I'd be surprised if he plays full 90s for them. Because if you're looking, because you have to look at this whole tournament as like a marathon, not a sprint. I mean, Spain
Okay,
has
but
depth
here's
options
my
there.
argument. Rodri for 70 minutes is probably better than 99% of every other DM. By DM, I mean defensive mid, for anyone who might not get it. But
I don't know,
that's
dude.
better than a lot of the other defensive mids that we have out there. And Spain
But
have a boatload of talented midfielders, but
they do. That's what I'm
he's
saying. They
that
have
good.
good. They have good depth
He's
options
that
there.
good.
Where at this point, I mean, like Rodri at points this season, whenever he's played for City, has not looked like the player that won the Ballon d'Or. He just hasn't. Like I don't know if he'll ever reclaim that form just due to fatigue or injuries, anything in that realm. It's just going to be. I just don't think he's going to consistently be playing for full 90s within this World Cup, but we'll see.
Yeah, yeah. I hear you. I
Let's
hear
go
you.
ahead and move to our later
Yeah.
slides here. So
So
these are
this was
going to
just a little,
stats.
yeah, just a little additional context that helps inform. As you can see, Harry Kane really kind of pops off the page there, right, with the 36 goals and 5 assists. And that's playing for, his club Bayern Munich. The important note here that we really want to make sure to highlight, right? The goals and assists are very important, but the minutes are equally as important, right? Because we look at Messi, he's played about 1,000 minutes up to this point in the season for his MLS side, Inter Miami. And then Isak has played 699. Will he be able to play all 90 minutes? Probably not, because he's not fully fit due to the injury that he suffered that was pretty horrific, honestly, earlier in the season.
Don't look at
But if we go over to your list, Paul, comparing the minutes,
Yep.
then we'll see a couple outliers there that I think are really important to note. Especially when we look at, as we mentioned, Messi is there, but Ousmane Dembele is someone that a lot of people are talking about right now in club football because he just won French Player of the Season for League One, and he played 1,000 minutes in the league.
Yeah.
Um,
It's a joke.
that's that's the equivalent of him playing about 11 matches out of what I think France is a 38 game season. I'll have to look and see, but
Yeah, so
um,
basically he plays less than a third of their games.
yeah, it is pretty insane that. But I mean, it goes to yeah. So in France, they play 34 matches, um, and that's insane, right? I really find. No, sorry, I think they do play 36. Let me make sure. Um, Nope, actually, I was right. It's 34. I thought it was over, but it is over.
Good
So
work, Luca.
34 matches. Um, that's just not a lot of time he's had on the pitch. But Dembele is someone that struggles with injuries historically. So knowing that his body is well rested is actually really great for the World Cup, and for France's chances of having him out there on the pitch. So,
Yeah.
um, yep. Any other points here to highlight, Paul, that you think are noteworthy for the listeners?
Um, I would say the only really other big number that stands out is Virgil van Dijk, the amount of minutes he's played this season,
Mhm.
3,300 for Liverpool. I mean, that's with I think this was pulled with, like, maybe 2 games to go in the season. So that's almost the
Mhm.
majority of Liverpool's season there in the Premier League that he's played on top of domestic competitions and also,
Mhm.
European competitions as well. So he's gonna have a ton hold on, of kilometers. I'm not saying another word on this podcast to in his legs. So he's somebody that's a little bit older. without him, that Dutch team probably will very much struggle. So we just want to see. Hopefully, he can get a
Mhm.
little rest before this World Cup, settle in, and be that figurehead that they need in the back. Because that I think what this really gets down to is we don't want to see players getting hurt in this World Cup. We want to see all of the best stars in world football out there playing for their countries, playing progressively, playing just like a brand of football where everybody's running around and just playing at a top level, which is really hard to do because I mean, as you can see, some of the minutes like Van Dyke, Holland. Let's see who else stands out. Maybe Bruno Fernandes too. All around those like 28 to 3,300 minutes in a season. Like this is
Yeah,
just context for the Premier League. Those are extremely hard minutes on your legs and your body. So we just want to see the best brand that this game can produce. And the simple fact is that FIFA, UEFA, all of these governing bodies are just asking way too much of these players. And that's why we have some people like Lamal, who is now at the point where it's like, is he going to be able to play in this World Cup? He's the best young star in the world. You want him on that stage. You want him present and out
mhm.
there on the pitch. And that's just the current iteration of football where too much is asked of these players. So we probably will see injuries in this World Cup. And I just hope it's minimal, you know?
Me too. Me too. And the thing is too, right? Some of these matches are going to be played on artificial turf, right? Because these stadiums aren't playing with natural grass like a lot of European clubs are.
Mhm.
And that is going to have a difference. And then when you factor in the increased temperature and humidity of playing in North America in the middle of the summer, that's gonna put players in that really dangerous zone, right? Where, the body starts cramping. Maybe you're more dehydrated than you're used to. And that just adds an extra layer of pressure onto these players' bodies
Yep.
after very demanding club season where what Declan Rice for England, he's played 60 matches. How many is it?
I think
Um,
he's close to 60.
and that's so many minutes in the legs, right?
Let's see
To
if I can
then
find
come
that.
and play for your club, your international team that these players would, they live and die for the badge to play for their country. So they're not going to be holding back, even though they might not be feeling 100% with their bodies. So we just really hope that, they come through unscathed. So we'll definitely be keeping our eyes on that. Another thing that we hope, but we know is going to happen, is that there was no FIFA halftime show. Take away the halftime show. It's ridiculous.
It's fraudulent.
It's disgusting, right? We have to Americanize something that is not. It just feels so wrong to have a halftime show for a football match. Um, so being Americans, we apologize to the rest of the world. It's disgusting. We don't like it. Sorry.
Yeah, we're not in support of this. We don't want to
Yeah.
associate with FIFA. We don't want to associate with UEFA or the American government. None of we we are agnostic in all of this. We don't want any association.
Yeah, we're very neutral here, very neutral. So, yeah, but I think that we could dive into more topics here, but at the end of the day, the most important thing is that these World Cups are defined by the players, right? The most talented players or the players who get very hot for a short stretch. Those are the players that define the success or failure of their teams for these tournaments. So hopefully by listening to this podcast, you guys feel like you've learned something about the players that we have covered. Because as I said, they're the ones that are going to determine who wins this World Cup. So,
Yep.
um, and if you're still here at this point, go down, click that subscribe button, give us a little
Please,
like, little thumbs up.
please.
We we don't want Paul to be begging for his food.
Hey, watch it.
So, hey, same boat. Um, but we really, really appreciate you guys joining for this podcast. Paul, any final thoughts for the listeners out there?
No, I think that this whole video series we're doing right now with topics circled around the World Cup. If you enjoy the content we're putting out, send it to your family, send it to your friends, send it to other soccer people you know,
Mhm.
because the whole idea here is that we do kind of want to just have a conversation, have a debate. We love talking about these things. I mean, we have an
Yeah.
FPL. This is an FPL podcast as well. We love talking about that, but we just like talking football in general too. Like we want to have those discussions. We want to like keep doing our little part, honestly, to help growing soccer in the U.S. because we started out with
Mhm.
people like well, when we started this podcast maybe 3 or 4 years ago, where, like, we were
Mhm.
starting our journey into football, where we were, like,
Yep.
just at the point
Yep.
where, we'd been around a little bit, we didn't know as much, and now both of us, really speak the whole soccer language and understand all of these things, and we can be a guide for people, or we just love to shoot the shit, so let us know. We wanna talk about these things, but I really appreciate everybody that listens and supports and all.
Mhm.
It means the
Yeah.
world.
It really does. So we really appreciate all of you all. I will close out the podcast on a very funny story that offers a little insight into Paul and I's lives. I remember the 2018, or was that 2014? Which World Cup was it? Where the US had made it past the group stage and they were playing in the knockouts against Belgium. And I was very uneducated about football at that point in
Mhm.
time. I was of the belief that the US was the far more talented and superior team being played, and they got absolutely blitzed. I can't remember how
Oh, it
many
was the
shots
Tim
on
Howard
target
game,
Belgium
right?
had. It was the Tim Howard game, right? Exactly, that's what I'm saying. Um, but in my mind, I was like, "I can't believe Belgium just beat the US." And now I've come full circle where I think anytime the US plays in this World Cup, I'm gonna be like, "I can't believe we managed a point. I can't believe we managed 3 points," if that does happen. And, let's say we go out on the group stage, I'm probably gonna be sitting here saying, "It was fair." So,
You
um
know, I wanna before we close out the pod, I wanna add a little more context to that I remember we were watching that game at Applebee's with our parents, which
yeah,
if you're
mhm,
not from
yes,
America, if you see an
mhm.
Applebee's, you should probably maybe keep driving, but
Yeah, we were on vacation,
I think we were
in
on
a little
vacation.
beach town in Florida, so
But
I do remember that at Applebee's.
I remember I was pretty active on Twitter at the moment, and I remember tweeting something like, "Who is this stupid redhead playing for Belgium?" And we'll find that tweet and recycle it because
We will, we
um,
will.
that's some really good content for the pod. But, like, no, that's a really good,
Yeah,
story to share with the listeners because we all start somewhere in our soccer journey or football journey, so,
we do, yep, so,
mhm, beautiful game.
regardless of where you all are at on your football journey, I always feel like you can talk to us about whatever, even if it just seems like a very simple in your mind, it's filled like a dumb question. We're always here to talk to anyone about any level of football, right? Because we've been there, right? Like we
Mhm,
began our journey and it's a long process to understand what's going on across international football, club football, the way teams are managed, the way they run financially. There's a whole complex list of topics that we can get into, but also keep an eye out for upcoming episodes in this series where we talk about the World Cup. We're going to talk about what to expect for the U.S. men's national team. We're going to do an episode on kind of the backstory on how the World Cup got to the U.S. and then the eventual fallout, right, of what we're seeing with some pretty ridiculous ticket prices and really how FIFA has monetized this World Cup, and is
mhm,
potentially stealing it from the fans. So,
yep,
and then we have a couple other topics we're going to dive into as well, but keep an eye out for those. Those will be coming out shortly.
yeah.
So,
Well, awesome. Okay.
um,
It's been a fun podcast.
it has been. Thank you guys for joining us. Paul, thanks for hosting. It's been a lot of fun, and we will be back with you all very soon. So we'll talk with you all shortly. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.